Hi, and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. As you know, on this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Today, I am joined by William Snowden, Associate Manager, Penetration Testing at Fortra, to discuss vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. William, welcome. Would you mind telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work within the vulnerability management side of Fortra. We offer penetration testing as a service. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and really excited. It provides an interesting challenge every day, and so that's what keeps me motivated.
All right. Well, thank you again for being here. Let's jump in. So first, can you explain the difference to me regarding vulnerability scanning and penetration testing?
Yeah, this is a question we actually get a lot, and it can be confusing. So both of these topics help organizations check their systems for weaknesses, but they serve different purposes and they go into different depths of testing. So vulnerability scanning tells you where you might be weak, and penetration testing shows you what can actually be breached. So to explain on that a little bit more, a vulnerability scan is going to use automated scanning technology to reach out to your network devices and determine where your assets and hosts live on the network and what services are running on them and what vulnerabilities may be impacting those services. So there are varying degrees of vulnerability scans. Oftentimes, these are done unauthenticated. That means that the scan is not logging into the system. But there are ways to do authenticated vulnerability scans, which log into the system and access the installed software and get deeper results on the weaknesses that are present. A penetration test is different in that it puts a person behind the keyboard and it allows them to demonstrate which vulnerabilities are going to be targeted with exploits and what happens when that exploit is successful. So this can lead to an even deeper analysis for your organization on where your weaknesses are, and it will help drive decisions about where to put your IT resources for remediation.
All right. Well, thank you. So you said automation. So what role does automation play in modern vulnerability management?
Yeah, automation is playing an increasingly larger role in vulnerability management. It is helping organizations to keep up with the sheer speed and scale of the threats that we're seeing today. And one example is how your devices are scanned in a vulnerability scan. So traditionally, this was just done from a centralized vulnerability scanning appliance, maybe a single host, and it reached out to all of the IP addresses on your network, scanning them for weaknesses, and then reporting back on the results. New technology and new ways to automate this allow you to deploy agents on individual systems that scan those systems locally and then report that vulnerability information back to a central platform. And that also helps you with deploying these agents on systems that are not always connected to the network, such as after the pandemic, a lot of individuals started working remote and you're not always connected to your network's VPN. And so your systems are sometimes online and sometimes off the network in terms of visibility. So being able to scan differently with automated technologies is just increasing the way that we detect vulnerabilities on networks and provide customers with information in their vulnerability management program about where your risks are, no matter where your hosts are.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, obviously the landscape of risk, it keeps changing. So how has the threat landscape evolved in recent years, and how has that impacted then the way credit unions should be approaching penetration testing?
Yeah, things have shifted dramatically in recent years, and it's good for credit unions to adjust their approach to penetration testing and vulnerability management in order to keep pace. So some of the things we've seen are ransomware and extortion attacks have surged. So cyber criminals aren't just stealing data. They're locking you out and demanding payment, often targeting smaller institutions like credit unions, which oftentimes appear to have weaker defenses and provide valuable member data to attackers. So there's also been third-party supply chain attacks, and credit unions increasingly rely on vendors for their core banking systems and mobile apps and cloud services. So attackers often go after those partners in order to get indirect access. Attackers are also moving faster and more sophisticated. Their tools and exploits are becoming more advanced. And so newly discovered vulnerabilities are being weaponized within days, sometimes hours. And if you just have standard infrequent testing, that may not cut it anymore.
All right. Well, with the increased risk, we've got all these emerging technologies too. So how are emerging technologies like AI and machine learning changing penetration testing and vulnerability scanning?
Yeah, AI is helping both vulnerability scanning and penetration testing move from a broad and basic approach to a more targeted and intelligent approach. For vulnerability scanning, you're seeing smarter prioritization because AI can be used to analyze massive amounts of vulnerability data to help automatically prioritize what matters most and not just what's technically vulnerable. And so that saves your organization time, and it's most likely going to provide benefits on resources whenever you're trying to manage remediation of your environment. It can also lead to fewer false positives. Machine learning models are learning from past scan results and allowing your SOC and monitoring services to make decisions faster and spend less time chasing issues that are turn out to be chasing ghosts. There's also faster discovery. And for penetration testing, we're seeing AI being used to assist exploitation, helping to create payloads that maybe beat signatures because these AI are able to create payloads that haven't been seen before. You can feed these payloads into the AI and it creates something totally new that hasn't been seen before. And a signature-based monitoring system might likely miss that. So this adversary approach that it's helping the scanners and the penetration testers, it's also helping the bad guys as well. So it's good to take an approach from a vendor that is consistently improving on its own tool sets as well.
All right. So how do you think then regulation like NIS2 and CISA guidelines are influencing how financial institutions test their security posture?
Yeah, regulations are pushing financial institutions towards a more frequent and realistic end-to-end testing methodology instead of just focusing on perimeter defenses. So regulations like NIS2 and the CISA guidelines are really raising the bar now for how financial institutions test and prove their security posture. So these aren't just recommendations. Oftentimes, these are shifting expectations towards a more continuous assurance rather than just periodic checkups. So with more frequent and comprehensive testing, you're seeing vulnerability assessments and penetration testing not become just an annual exercise anymore. It's also no longer enough to say that we ran a test. Regulators expect organizations to show real world readiness. That means testing incident response, resilience against ransomware, and the ability to recover from attacks through tabletop exercises, purple teaming, and scenario-based testing. So this, along with both NIS2 and CISA, emphasize the importance of documenting your test results, showing your remediation actions, and your risk decisions. So it provides auditable evidence of testing and continuous improvement.
All right. So I have to ask, what are the most overlooked vulnerabilities that still show up frequently?
Yeah. So a lot of people may be expecting an answer that, I'm going to bring out some, exotic new vulnerability or anything like that. But honestly, the tried and true tactics of default configurations are still one of the most common attacks that we see. This can be from whenever you provision systems onto your network, that some default configurations for certain protocols are left enabled, which allow for name resolution poisoning attacks. There's also default configurations in Active Directory certificate services that permit attackers to escalate privileges. So those are just a few that I can name, but what they represent are that the basics like patching, passwords, access control, and changing your default configurations are still the weak links. So attackers don't need to get fancy if the front door is wide open, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So what's one piece of advice you wish more, chief information security officers or the security leads understood about penetration testing and vulnerability scanning?
Yeah, so what I would say is that penetration testing and vulnerability scanning are not the finish line. They're really a starting point for real security improvement over time. And too often, CISOs and security leads, they treat these activities like one-time checkboxes, unfortunately, in order to satisfy a compliance regulation or to provide a report for auditors once a year. But the real value doesn't come from just running one scan or a test. It comes from continuous improvement, and that includes prioritizing and remediating your findings, rescanning those remediation results to make sure that it actually took and that the vulnerability really was cleared from the system. Understanding how these issues connect to real world business risk and tracking whether these fixes are improving your security posture over time. So the only way you can really do that is by testing again and again and again through a continuous improvement methodology. So in short, I guess I'll say a scan or a pen test report sitting in a folder doesn't make you better protected. If you have to act on it consistently and quickly every time.
All right. So what's the best way for credit unions to then prioritize remediation efforts after the testing?
Right. So as a penetration tester myself, I will say that not all vulnerabilities are equal. So what I would start with is the vulnerabilities that are easily exploitable. And by that, I mean that there are publicly available exploits for the vulnerability, or it's something as simple as like a default password, which requires no skill. It just requires the knowledge of what the default passwords are in order for you to exploit that vulnerability. So I would put exploitability at the top, and then next move on to business impact. So prioritize issues that could impact your core banking systems, online banking, payment processors, member data, account information, PII, and essential operations such as loan origination and ACH processing. And then after that, you can kind of tackle some of the other vulnerabilities that, if exploited, might be violations of a compliance or regulatory framework. And that includes things like GLBA, NCUA, and those kinds of things that you require that an auditor is going to ding you on. But again, I would still put exploitability and business impact above what is going to show up on your compliance or regulatory framework report.
All right. So how does Fortra approach, to penetration testing and vulnerability scanning differ from others in the industry?
Yeah, so Fortra offers a unique approach to this. We have a unified suite for our vulnerability management and penetration testing services within our cyber portfolio. So we have our Fortra Vulnerability Manager platform. This is a platform where you will perform all of your vulnerability scanning on your network, centrally manage your vulnerabilities. It tracks your assets across all of your scans. So you never have to look at an individual vulnerability scan report. You have an easy to use dashboard that shows you all of your current weaknesses as of your latest vulnerability scans. It allows you to have more precision with your remediation tasks because you can account for assets that have been scanned recently and those that seem to have dropped off from the scanning solution. And then we've also added in our penetration testing services inside that Fortra VM platform. So it does not matter if the vulnerability was found through a vulnerability scan, through your regularly vulnerability management services, or your penetration test. Your vulnerabilities are still located all in one place for you to easily manage and show continuous improvement like those new regulatory compliance frameworks are trying to do.
All right. Well, thank you. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
I would definitely get on board. I like the idea of these new regulations that require continuous improvement and demonstration over time of improved security posture. Vulnerability scanning is really the most basic form of where you can start. Penetration testing is a natural complement to that. If I like to think of it as your vulnerability scanning are kind of like the quizzes that you take when you're in a class, and then the penetration test is the actual test, the exam that you are preparing for. And so you could prepare for your penetration test by doing your vulnerability scans and patching and passwords and access controls and all the things that are going to be found on your vulnerability scan in order to prepare for your penetration test. And as your organization grows and evolves in its security posture, then you continue to challenge your organization with more complex assessments, such as adding in phishing engagements and then adding in web application testing, and all the way up to red teaming and purple teaming, using the highly advanced offensive security tools. So walk before you run, but always show continuous improvement until you reach a mature security posture within your environment.
All right. Well, thank you, William. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. This episode of Financial Minds is brought to you by Viso Financial's Risk Management Solutions. Technology will advance, trends will come and go, but risk is here to stay. What is your credit union doing to manage risk? It's all about finding the right partner with industry expertise and reliable risk management solutions to help you build a secure future. At Viso Financial, we've teamed up with the best companies in the industry, Defense Storm, Fortra, and KnowBe4, to offer a full suite of risk management solutions, including fraud prevention, threat surveillance, social engineering testing, penetration testing, and vulnerability scanning. Plus, you can have the support of the Viso Financial team of experts, and you can earn exclusive discounts through our partnerships. To learn more, visit www.vfccu.org or contact your Viso Financial corporate account manager to learn more. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.